Hey guys, welcome to the latest episode of the 4040 Vision podcast, the ultimate sports history pod where hindsight is 40/40. Before we get started, let's pay some bills and hear from our presenting sponsors. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 4040 Vision podcast. I am your host, Khaled Abdallah, joined today by my fellow co-host, Osama Dahud. What's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm feeling very festive. I got my Draymond Green shooting with a backpack on shirt. Shout out Warriors World, ready to rock.
Yeah, big shout out to Warriors World, doing cool shit on and off the court. Awesome follow on Twitter. And really cool guys, or cool guy. I think it's one guy that runs it. Anyway, today's topic is the best and worst case scenarios for the Eastern Conference. The premise is simple. We're going to go down the list of the teams in the Eastern Conference, the order of which has been decided by their projected win total. So I pulled these win totals from, I believe, DraftKings or FanDuel, one of those two guys. So, don't get mad if I'm a number or a win or two off or half a game off or whatever it is. That's what I got earlier this week, so that's what we're going to go with. We're going to talk about their key additions, key losses. Osama's going to tell us what he thinks the best and worst case scenarios are going to be, and we're going to decide which of the two is more likely. So we will start with a team that was in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and that is the Boston Celtics. Their over-under is 54.5, and last year's record was 57-25. I believe they were the 2 seed last year behind the Bucks. And their key additions, the big headliner, Jrue Holiday, the big trade from Portland by way of Milwaukee. Kristaps Porzingis was another big acquisition for them. They brought back Jaylen Brown on a contract extension and added Wenyen Gabriel. We'll just give him a shout out for that. Key losses, Marcus Smart, who was the emotional heartbeat of this team, Grant Williams, Robert Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, and Danilo Gallinari. So with those additions and losses in mind, what do you think are the best and worst case scenarios for the Celtics?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they probably should have gone to the finals, right? They just got beat up by that Miami team, and they lost 3 straight games, and they were punked. Even though they were on paper the better team, they played better all year. They had the best record in the East, or second best record in the East. So, yeah, I mean, the Holiday, great addition. I think their perimeter defense is going to be good. With Porzingis, they just have a really good top 4. So I do like that they'll be able to score as well as they have in the past. And still a great defensive team too. Maybe they take a slight step back with Robert Williams out, but at least they'll have guys that'll be playing games. He was like rarely healthy for them. It's hard to say though how different Jrue Holiday is from Marcus Smart. Like Marcus Smart had a lot of like, I got this, guys, you know. Yeah. And if you remember the year the Bucks won the championship, so did Jrue Holiday. He had some like 2 for 10s, and he was like, "What the hell is this guy doing?" Both great defenders, but they could be cooked. Like Marcus Smart, the year after his Defensive Player of the Year, was totally baked last year. Jimmy Butler just told Jrue Holiday to his face, like, "I own you. I put you in my pocket. You're my son now." I mean, that's different. Like, Jimmy Butler was an enigma in the playoffs, but nonetheless,
that series, not even the playoffs, just that series.
Yeah. So nonetheless, like, okay, maybe it's a slight upgrade. Maybe he's a slightly better playmaker. He can move quickly on his feet and guard all of the other teams' best guard players. Shout out Milwaukee. I think they'll still be a top 2, top 3 team in the East. I don't think that that changes anything. They have a lot of depth. Interior defense takes a bit of a dip without Robert Williams. Al Horford's going to play maybe 15 minutes a game now. He's just kind of up there in age. The only other thing is the depth itself. Like, we just don't know. Like with Grant Williams out, I don't really know what this team looks like. They kept Peyton Pritchard. Boston fans really like him. He's okay. I think they'll hit the over. I think they're going to look great.
So how does this go bad, if it does go bad?
Porzingis' health is definitely one, just because it's always been a question mark. And defensively, his fit, if they can get the best out of him, that's not a worst case. But yeah, so let's say Porzingis' health is a worst case. That makes it go bad. And I would say the defense interior, which goes back to Porzingis too, like with Robert Williams out, is this only going to be a team that can defend on the outside. Their switchability back and forth, I think that's a concern. And that's pretty much it. Like, I think that the only team that's a bad matchup for them is Milwaukee, really, which is what the case last year. They just got out executed by the Heat. I think that they have a clear path to winning the East.
Yeah. I would add that the coaching is where it could go bad. So I think if we divide it into two things, right, the regular season versus the playoffs, I think they're going to pretty much cruise through the regular season. The East is not great. They have clearly the best talent in the East on paper. They have the best starting five, which however they want to construct that starting five, if they go Holiday, White, the two Jalen's, or the two J's, I should say, and then Porzingis, however they want to do it, they're going to have the best starting five probably in the East. And, their 8-man rotation or 10-man rotation, again, is probably among the best. I do think there are concerns come playoff time about that front court depth, about that interior defense, about that playmaking. We saw a lot of hero ball last year from them. We saw that both Jason and Jalen were both, content to dribble the clock out and, pound the rock and do all that stuff, my turn, your turn type stuff. I think the big difference is, I know Holiday is not a traditional point guard, but I think he has a great awareness of the situation. And I don't think he's going to be like Marcus Smart, where he's going to be like, I got this, guys. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's not going to do that. I think he had to on Milwaukee because they didn't have, Middleton was, was good that year, but I don't think they had a third scorer on that team. And on this team, they got plenty of scoring. They got plenty of wing depth. Porzingis is going to add a new element to them as, a shooting big man. So I'm definitely going with best case scenario for them in the regular season, but I do think there's going to be some questions come playoff time to see if, Joe Mazzulla is really the guy for them.
And I think that it's interesting because I think all year Boston fans were really iffy on him. And then I think he won their hearts over by winning 3 straight games and almost overcoming a 3-0. I think that they're kind of just they've talked themselves into it. So I TBD.
Yeah. I want to say it was Bill Simmons that said, if he had lost, if they got swept or whatever it was, if they lost in 5 to Miami, then he's getting fired. But because they lost in 7, then he kept the job because he won him over. I don't know if I don't really agree with that kind of results-based analysis, but maybe they're giving him another year. Like, all right, you guys had chemistry issues, whatever. So they'll give him a little bit more time. But I don't see it going bad until, again, March, April time. I think the cruise to the regular season. So next are the Milwaukee Bucks, who coincidentally, they have the same win total as the Celtics, as 54.5. Last year, they were the 1 seed, 58-24. Their season ended in disastrous fashion as they lost in, I believe, 5 games to the 8-seeded Miami Heat. Their big acquisition is Damian Lillard. They brought back Chris Middleton, brought back Brook Lopez, Jay Crowder. They added Robin Lopez, Cameron Payne, and Malik Beasley. And their key losses, the aforementioned Drew Holiday, Grayson Allen, Joe Ingles, Wesley Matthews, nothing special. So not too many big losses except for Drew Holiday. So what are the best and worst case scenarios for the Bucks here?
I mean, the best case scenario is they win the championship. Obviously, they have the talent to do that. They added Damian Lillard. Wow, that does a lot for your team. In terms of spacing, I mean, they're just going to have a ton of space. I think that Giannis doesn't really have to, if he doesn't want to, put his head down 11 times a game and barrel into a wall of the other team's biggest players. And I think that Dame Lillard will provide quite a luxury in late game execution, a lot of shooting options on this team still. They have a new coach, which is a super underrated part of this team's progress this year. Coach Bud was, I don't know how to describe. He's just stubborn in terms of willingness to
That's a nice
adapt.
way to put it. Yeah, it's a nice way to put it.
I'll be nice. Yeah. Stubborn in terms of adapting. So I think that in terms of development and their defense, they'll be pretty stingy still. For the most part, they got the best 1-2 punch or a top 1-2 punch in the league. Their depth's pretty good enough. The concern is Damian Lillard's defense. Sorry, you're probably going to ask me about worst case, but best case, yeah. All of that being said, they win the championship.
So, yeah, I mean, tell me the worst case. How does this go bad?
Yeah, perimeter defense is a concern. Dame Lillard is untested in these scenarios in the West, where he was thwarted by Steph Curry several times. Didn't work out for him. They don't have a Drew Holiday on this team to guard the other team's best offensive player. Giannis can't do it. So I think while he's against the league's best offensive guards on a nightly basis, even in the Eastern Conference, it's going to be a big problem for him. And I think that could be something that slows them down a little bit. Chris Middleton's health is another one. He barely played last season. He didn't look right in the playoffs. I would say those are the two things. Aside from health, again, it's a two-way race with them in Boston.
If you had to pick between the two, which way are you leaning at this moment in time?
I'm going with the Bucks. I think that they just have a higher ceiling. I think last season was just an anomaly. This shit happens once in a while, but I don't see it happening again. And I think they have a chip on their shoulder. They're not going to go out like that.
Yeah, I think the Giannis back injury combined with just Middleton not being the same guy. I want to say it was not a fugazi 1 seed, but they weren't exactly challenged during the regular season. I mean, Giannis is an incredible regular season player. The physicality he brings. I mean, you said he's probably not going to put his head down and barrel into guys, but it's pretty effective when he does it, right? Like if he's going to be drawing fouls and doing all that stuff. So it works in the regular season. And I think the biggest thing that Dame Lillard brings to this team is just closing offense. How many times have we seen this guy just on his own win games, basically shooting half-court shots, taking bad shots, shout out to Paul George, and just taking over games in the last 5 minutes. And then you combine that with Giannis, who is one of the most physically dominant players in the NBA. So if he has the confidence to take free throws, which I think he just lost that confidence last year, he had plenty of that during the title season. If he gains that back, combined with the spacing that Dame brings, the playmaking that Dame brings, and just the shot making that he brings, I think that's going to be the big, big, big plus. I'm not too concerned about their perimeter defense. I feel like with Dame, I think most of defense is effort, right? And if he's on a Portland team where it's like, you are our offense, you're not the, number one option. You are the offense, essentially. So we need you to score. And we don't need you to do anything but score. I think on this team, obviously Giannis can take over a game. I mean, even Brook Lopez, Chris Middleton, like he's going to have other options. So I think he's going to try a little bit harder on defense just because he's not going to have to work as hard on offense. Am I completely off base there?
I agree with that. We're just nitpicking, right? Like how many weaknesses is this team supposed to have when they have the 2 of the 10 best offensive players in their starting lineup?
Yeah, exactly. I think they're aside from Boston being the best team on paper, I think Milwaukee gives them a run for their money. I do think that they, to me, are the favorite to be the 1 seed. I think Boston's going to have some other issues with fitting some of these guys in and stuff like that. I think it's just a clearer path for Milwaukee to be the 1 seed. They're my pick to represent the East in the finals. Right. So the next team is really intriguing. I was kind of surprised to see this team up here, and that is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Their projected win total or over under is 50.5. Last year they went 51-31, which I think was kind of a surprise. Their big additions are Max Strus and George Niang. They brought back Karis LeVert. They got another backup point guard in Ty Jerome, and they signed Tristan Thompson for some reason. Can't figure out why. And their big losses, quote unquote big, are Robin Lopez and Shetty Osman. So, right. So, best and worst case scenario for the Cleveland Cavs. And are you surprised that they were this high on the list?
I think if you asked me before last season that, hey, this is going to be a top 3 team in the East, I would have like, really? But I know they added Donovan Mitchell, and I think Evan Mobley is super underrated. Huge fan of his. He's just one of those franchise key players that can just do so much for your team defensively. He can space the floor. Just an incredible player. I think best case, I mean, they can get to the second round of the playoffs like last year. maybe the conference finals is probably their best case. Like that's the highest they could go if they get the best out of Donovan Mitchell in the postseason. It was the way they went out was really disappointing. So I think that with all this incredible young talent, there is definitely a margin to get better, especially in the postseason. Defensively, they were pretty stingy during the regular season too. The rim protection with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley is really good. They added Max Strus, great shooting options with him and George Niang. So I like the team. I think that they can get close to, if not hit that over the East. Aside from these like top 3, 4, 5 teams, there's not much else there. I think that for me, the key is Mitchell. Mitchell is on it. Makes everyone better. This team can really make a run at least towards the top 3 again in the East.
Yeah, they got exposed a bit in the playoffs. This, too big rotation or too big lineup they had with Mobley and Allen. They got played off the floor by the Knicks, which was, I guess it should have been predictable. I mean, I picked the Cavs to win that series, but we've seen time and time again, if you have a big like Jared Allen, Rudy Gobert, guys like that, like they're just going to get played off the floor in the playoffs. But in the regular season, they can be huge difference makers because they're the only guys like playing really hard defense, and that makes the difference. And I think this team for the regular season, I wouldn't be surprised if they're pushing for the 1 seed because they have a lot of young talent, which I think is a key factor here. You look at Milwaukee and Boston, their goal is to win the title. That's all they care about. It's all that matters. If you're Cleveland, getting the 1 seed or the 2 seed is something that you want. It's something that you're going to be chasing because it's one of those benchmarks that you want to hit as a young team that's growing and developing. And I think with guys like Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, like they're incredible regular season players, especially Donovan Mitchell. Like the guy scored 70 points last year in a game, and that's the kind of stuff that's obviously only going to happen in the regular season. So I think that combination with the front court depth that they have with those 2 bigs, I think, I don't know, if I had to pick like a dark horse 1 seed, I'd probably go with the Cavs. And I think that they're going to push for that just because they're not probably going to do as much load management and stuff as some of these other, I wouldn't say Boston is an older team, but they have more injury concerns with Porzingis and wanting to keep Holiday fresh and all that stuff. So I think it goes really well for them in the regular season. And I think you said they were going to, could make the conference finals, and that would not surprise me one bit. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the only way this goes bad is in terms of execution, and it might come down to coaching. I don't know what to think of JB Bickerstaff. I'm just not sure. I think it's
people really soured on him in the playoffs.
They were out executed. Yeah. They looked very mistake prone, like you said. They whimpered out against the Knicks team that I'm not impressed by whatsoever.
No.
So I think that there's just a lot of upside. One question is, if this Jared Allen, Evan Mobley thing doesn't work, does someone try to trade for Allen and the Cavs just look to start Mobley at the 5 and do some sort of, all right, we'll have a little more traditional lineup. We're not going to go Twin Towers anymore.
I mean, he's a big candidate for that. I want to say he's on an expiring deal, or at least like a very affordable deal. So if you're a team, I mean, I don't think it's realistic for a team like the Warriors or something to make this kind of deal. But if you think about who could use a guy like that, it's like OKC. They could use a traditional big like that. The Warriors to put him to give Looney some relief there. There's a lot of teams that could use him. He seems almost kind of surplus to requirements. But at the same time, if you're Cleveland, you know that he's a big key to at least your regular season success. So it's almost like, how much do we prioritize the playoffs? Because we know he can play. It's just he just can't play with Evan Mobley at the same time. So maybe you just take that approach, like, let's go for that 1 seed. Let's keep our talent together because we have that talent. And then, we'll see how things go in the offseason. I think it's unlikely that he gets moved.
I agree with that. It could be just more of a matchup thing. If it makes sense, play them both. If it doesn't, just find another answer.
Yeah.
Max Strus. The Strus is loose.
Yeah, they have shooting too. That was the other thing. You mentioned Strus and Yang, and they got spacing, and Karis LeVert. I mean, he's kind of he's like one of my least favorite type of players, like that archetype, like the volume scorer, just everybody give me the ball and everybody get out of my way type guy. But you need that if he's going to be coming off your bench. Sometimes you need that kind of guy, and I think he fits a good role there. So next up, the Philadelphia 76ers. So this offseason has been dramatic, to say the least. But their projected win total, 49.5. Last year, they went a surprising 54-28, despite some of the issues they had. Joel Embiid won the MVP, all that good stuff. Their key additions, Kelly Oubre, Patrick Beverley. They brought back Paul Reed. They brought back Montrezl Harrell. And they signed Mo Bamba for some further front court depth. Key departures, Jalen McDaniels, Shake Milton, George Niang, and slam dunk champion Mac McClung, who played, I don't know, a couple games for them at the end of the season. Just had to throw that in there. And, I mean, this is a very fluid situation. As of today, we're recording this on October 18th. James Harden was not with the team in training camp. He's hanging out in Houston, doing whatever he's doing. So it's very likely that this roster looks very different in the next month or so. But what are the best and worst case scenarios for the Sixers here?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I mean, James Harden basically, what do you call it? Quitting? Let's just call it quitting. He's quitting on the team. Basically, that's a tough one. Best case, if James Harden's not on the team, I don't know what the best case trade scenario is. I don't see it making the team like way, way better. And it looks like another second round exit to me right now, even with Embiid, because Harden led the league in assists. They were a pretty like well-rounded team. I still think they're a well-rounded team. They just missed that like killer instinct because they went to a game 7 and it just all fell apart for them when it mattered the most. And I don't know if that changes with Tyrese Maxey, but to keep it on a positive note for now, at least, Joel Embiid played 65 games over the last 2 seasons. They were top 10 in defense. I don't think that changes with the James Harden departure. It's still a good basketball team. During the regular season, they still have the big FU players like PJ Tucker, for better or worse, Kelly Oubre, Pat Beverley. So I think that they still have like a well-rounded team they could put out there with a mix of shooting and switching defense and perimeter defense. It's going to be a solid regular season team. There's just question marks about the postseason.
Yeah, I've seen packages. Basically, I mean, it's basically just the Clippers that have shown at least any interest, according to the rumors and stuff like that. Some combination of Terrence Mann and one of those other anonymous wings that the Clippers like seem to like just pull off the bench at random times. And I think it's going to be an addition by subtraction type thing of just getting rid of James Harden and resetting the clock on the Embiid happiness or Embiid morale meter. I don't think there's like a big move, but it's just going to be like, all right, dude, like we're going to cut out this drama. We just want you to play basketball. We're going to, we brought in some other bigs to take some of the weight off you. I mean, Mo Bamba's not great, but he's a big body out there. B-Ball Paul, people love him and they think that he can be something. So I think it's going to be a older, more mature team than it was in the past. I mean, I think the addition of Nick Nurse is big, and moving on from Doc Rivers and all that stuff, that all the baggage that comes with him and the playoffs and the blown leads and all that stuff. I think that is an underrated addition is the new coach, and I think there's going to be some creativity to this offense, and I'm leaning the positive for them, especially if they can get rid of James Harden, basically hand the keys to Tyrese Maxey, who I think is a great young player. So which way are you leaning here?
I still think they can hit the over just barely. But if I had to put my money on it, I'd probably bet the under, just because I just don't know if Maxey if he's a viable replacement. I don't know if this thing starts off poorly, the Joel Embiid to like the New York Knicks rumors start to really pick up, or to the Miami, who's been in every conversation for everybody over the last 7 years. And I think they got Jimmy Butler, and that's pretty much it, but they're next anyway. So yeah, I mean, that's as good as it's going to get. I think that they'll make the second round. Tyrese Maxey will put up the best numbers of his career, and the Joel Embiid happiness watch will be an around-the-clock thing, depending on how the season goes.
Yeah, it was Giannis the past couple of years on like The Jump or whatever these daily NBA shows. Where's Giannis going to go next year? I don't think he's going anywhere now that they got Dame, or at least for a little bit. So yeah, Embiid is going to be the next guy up for that.
I will say the Nick Nurse thing. Yeah, I did forget to mention that is super underrated. When he was in Toronto, they threw the kitchen sink at teams like every night. They were doing all kinds of wild shit on defense. Offensively, this is already a good team, and I think that that'll speak for itself. They will be a handful, and they'll be more disciplined. And I wonder if he was the coach instead of Doc Rivers. Maybe they don't blow that Game 7, possibly. I don't know.
And Game 6, too. They were up
in Game 6 where they had it, yeah.
Yeah, I think looking at their lineup, I think they may be the best defensive team in the East. If you're throwing out Pat Beverly, Kelly Oubre is not the smartest player, but he's a plus defender. Tobias Harris, PJ Tucker, Embiid, and then you have depth. You have that big man depth, which I think it matters. So I'm pretty high on this team, despite the Harden issues, at least in the regular season, because Embiid is an incredible regular season player when he's healthy. His body just happens to break down every March or April. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality. So next, we're talking about the ultimate playoff team and probably one of the worst regular season teams in recent history, and that is our Miami Heat. Their projected win total, 45.5. Last year, they were 44-38, and they were technically a 7 seed, became the 8 seed in the play-in, but they brought back Kevin Love. They drafted Jaime Jaquez Jr. from out of UCLA, really cool young player. They signed Josh Richardson, Thomas Bryant, brought back a bunch of other guys. They're probably cloning some G League All-Stars, under the arena somewhere. Have you heard about Jamal Cain? Apparently he's an incredible young player. He's, some anonymous guy. He's like the next Gabe Vincent, Max Strus type guy. And speaking of those guys, their key departures, Max Strus, of course, Gabe Vincent. They lose Oladipo, who was hurt anyway, Cody Zeller, and Omer Yurtseven. So there's a lot going on with this team. They lose out on the Dame Lillard sweepstakes. There's a lot of question marks about them. What are the best and worst case scenarios for this team?
This is tough because every year they manage.
You've said that for every East team, just to let you.
Yeah, well, these like top teams are a little less predictable, I would say. Yeah. In terms of like the overall outcome. I mean, look, I like Miami going into last season. They were the 1 seed. They were the best shooting team in the league. So I think what makes this one difficult, and by the way, they were a shot away from going to the finals that other season, right? The one where the Celtics went. So yeah, I mean, going into last season, I was like, yeah, they run it back. That's a great team. They didn't get better. I wasn't excited that they didn't get better, but and it showed, by the way. They were the 25th ranked offense in basketball. They were a terrible shooting team. They regressed like ridiculously. They were still a top 10 defense. So, I mean, that's not going anywhere because this is a really disciplined team. They're going to maximize the talent they have. Like you said, they added a bunch of G League guys. Even though they didn't get Dame, I think that's going to make them even more of like a dangerous bleep you team throughout the season. Butler and Bam are an excellent duo. Jaime Jaquez, I haven't gotten the pronunciation down. Yeah. Jaquez. I think so. I mean, interesting prospect. Like he's good at a lot of the things Miami Heat players do. He can get to the line. He uses ball fakes. He can be a knockdown shooter from outside. He's got a bit of an old man game, the way he gets open. So yeah,
I've heard him described as a Latino Jimmy Butler. So
yeah, well, Rick Fox was kind of like that, like just crafty. He's a crafty vet at 19 years old or something like that already. So best case, look, I'm not talking about finals again. It's not possible. I think they look better throughout the year, and I think they're in that like second round exit. Just they didn't get better, so I can't give them conference finals or finals, even though last year was an impressive display of basketball execution.
I see them treading water as I think they're going to be just above the play-in mark because they did lose some key pieces, but I trust their talent development, more than anybody in the NBA. I think we'll see more from Jovic, not Jokic. I think they they just find guys off the street, and we joke about heat culture and everybody. I think they shut everybody up about heat culture and what it is and what it really is with that finals run last year. And I mean, you could talk about the bubble and discredit that all you want, but they were in the finals back then too. And then, like you said, they were a shot away from the finals. So they're always in the mix, and they're, a shot away or game away here and there from getting to the finals or winning the finals. So I can never count them out. As long as they have this infrastructure, they have the superstar in Jimmy Butler, who's, at least a superstar when it counts. You have a great big man. I think they just have dudes. They just always find dudes. I think the talent is going to keep them from being like a top 4 seed, but I do think that they're going to take the regular season a little bit more seriously this year, and they're going to work some of these younger guys into that rotation. I think they're going to be like just above the play-in mark. What do you think?
Yes, I think so. I think that as long as Jimmy Butler plays over 55 games, Kyle Lowry, they only got like 50 games from him or something last year, and he's their only like good point guard. So I think that they are hinging a lot on these guys being healthy. As long as they could summon the magic to be as fairly good as they were last year, I agree. They could stay out of the play-in as the 6th seed is out of the play-in. I think that's about where they'll be at.
Yeah. Okay, next up, the New York Knicks. Their projected win total 45.5 or over under. Last year they were 47-35. Key additions: they signed Dante DiVincenzo from the Warriors. They brought back Josh Hart. Signed a couple of guys. They signed Obi Toppin's brother, Jacob Toppin. And their key departures, Obi Toppin and Derrick Rose. So not massive losses. This is a team that's pretty much intact from last year. They just added a couple pieces around the edges. What do you think happens with this team? Give me their best and worst case scenarios.
I think best case, it's the very best they can get to again is the second round. I think this one's not tough. I'm going to say this is not a tough one to talk about here. They added a nice piece in Dante DiVincenzo. They kept Josh Hart, who was, I believe, they traded for in the middle of the season.
Yep.
I think defensively, it's surprising. You look at the numbers. They were the third best offense in basketball in terms of rating, and they were 19th in defense, which is, again, surprising for like a Tom Thibodeau team.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think they overachieved a lot offensively. Third offensively in the league sounds quite jarring. I think that they got the best out of Jalen Brunson, and I think he just had a chip on his shoulders, being like, well, this is going to be the guy. And I think he really showed out for that. So I think that's their best case, again, is maybe the second round. They should have lost in the first round. I think just the Cavs are a bunch of silly bitches, I think is what happened there. I would say the questions are like, they didn't get better. I don't think. You look at these additions, they're a bunch of free agents. They didn't have a draft pick. Offensively, their schemes are a concern. It lacks imagination. The Tom Thibodeau offense doesn't seem to have much ball movement. It's Julius Randle, do your thing, save the day, and that's not going to happen. I think he's a blocker on this team's ceiling until they find someone else who can be a primary or secondary scoring option. This is as good as they're going to get.
Mm-hmm. You hit the nail on the head there about Julius Randle. I just think you could say blocker, ceiling, whatever. They're going to go as far as he will take them, and that's not very far. I'm not high on him as a player. I think he's just too ball dominant. He becomes a black hole on offense at times, and I don't think he's good enough to justify that. I think at some point in this season, the Knicks are going to have to decide, is this Jalen Brunson's team or is this Julius Randle's? And I think there was a lot of push and pull there. And in the playoffs, when it came down to it, Julius Randle took it. He's like, this is mine. This is my team. I'm going to take the shots. You talk about Marcus Smart saying, I got this. Julius Randle was doing exactly that. And I think he was doing it on a bum ankle or a bum foot. So it was even worse. So I see them more as a play-in team. They have some nice pieces. I think unless there's a move that they make, I think like you said, they overachieved last year. I think they're going to get closer to like the 40-win mark this year. I don't see them going over that 45.5. And I do see them kind of getting sucked into that play-in. I think they got a little lucky last year with how things played out.
Agreed.
All right. So next, the Atlanta Hawks. Their over-under is 42.5. Last year, they were a remarkable 41-41. I feel like we don't see that often, right? We don't see that for some reason. It's like you're there 40-42, 42-40. It's to be 500 is a special achievement. So they gave DeJounte Murray a bunch of money, gave him a contract extension. They drafted Kobe Buffkin, 15th overall. They signed Patty Mills, or traded for Patty Mills inside Wesley Matthews. And their big departure was John Collins, who they traded for like a bag of peanuts to the Jazz. I think it was Rudy Gay and some other stuff, just basically for nothing. They kind of gave him away. So how do you see things going for this team? What's their best and worst case scenario for the Hawks?
I think last year was just a really disappointing year for them. I liked the DeJounte Murray, at least in concept trade, because Trae Young is just such a defensive liability. You needed someone to hide him and guard the other team's best guards, because that's who they were. Trae Young is being taken advantage of. I mean, best case, they make the playoffs and they do well. I think they lost in the play-in, right? So, or no, Philly? Philly?
They ended up being the 7 seed. They lost to Boston.
Or was it
in the first
Boston?
round.
Man, my memory's killing me. I think that I think a full season with Quinn Snyder should really improve just everything across the board: the execution, their defense. I think Nate McMillan's more of an offensive coach, and they hated him just like they hated the other guy, Lloyd Pierce. So they seem to have a problem with their coaching. But this is a guy that really just, in terms of development, just changed the Utah Jazz. So I do expect Trae Young to do a lot of different things. I expect him to just look a lot more efficient this year, to some degree, because he's a bit of a volume guy. I like Okongwu. I think his impact will be significant. So I think best case, they just look a little better in the playoffs. They were meddlesome against a Boston team that was trying to figure things out a little bit early on. I like them to just look better than 500. That's offensively they were decent. They were top 10. Defensively, I think is where there's a lot to be desired there.
Yeah, and they beat the Heat in the play-in game to get that 7 seed. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, right? Who would have thought? This team, when it's good, it's great, right? When Trae Young is shooting 60% from the field and he's hitting threes from half court, it looks awesome, right? When it's going bad, it's like a car crash, right? He's shooting them out of games. I mean, he has like that Donovan Mitchell approach of like shooting you in a game or shooting you out of a game. And it's just, there's so much variance, I think, with his play style and the way he approaches the game. I don't see him as a winning player. I don't see them making any noise in the playoffs. I do think you brought up the good point about Quinn Snyder. But you wonder, if you run out 2 coaches in, however long, it's like maybe you're the problem. You know what I'm saying? Maybe Trae Young is the problem. And I know there was like flirtations or rumors about them trading him last year and building the team around DeJounte Murray. Obviously, that didn't end up happening. I think he's like the more marketable star of the two. But I just don't see a team that's built around him making any real noise. To me, he's like a discount Dame Lillard. Your ceiling is first round, second, maybe like a fluke conference finals run, which they already had that fluke conference finals run. I'm just completely out on this team. I do think they're going to be in the play-in just because the East is not great. So I think of the bad East teams, I think they are, closer to the top of that pile. So yeah, I'm not seeing much for them.
I think my main question is, they finally traded John Collins after flirting around with trade rumors for him for 2 seasons. And he was like 13, 16 points a game. Who fills that gap? I assume that it's going to be a combination of guys they already have, like Okongwu, DeAndre Hunter, maybe some of that. Kobe Buffkin is a pretty good pickup for them in the draft. He's pretty crafty. He's got handles. He's got a pretty good mid-range game. He can create space, even though he's not that quick. So maybe it's more of a team effort to make up for that, because they were still a top 10 offense. So I think that's going to be the main question. But their ceiling is not going to be much higher than that. I just think they're just a touch better than 500.
Yeah, I'm going under that. I think they're going to be under 500 and in the play-in mix.
I know you don't like Trae Young. I actually like Trae Young. I like that he's got a competitive fire to him. I like those guys.
He does. He's just, I don't know, man. Like I said, he's discount Dame Lillard to me. It's just that's fine. He's going to have his 40, 50-point games, and then the next week he's going to be 2 for 15 or 2 for 17, and sulk his way around. So just not a fan of the attitude. Next, the Indianapolis Pacers. They were probably one of the more fun teams.
Man, it's easy to make that distinction. The Indianapolis Pacers, isn't it? Indiana Pacers.
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. The Indiana Pacers. You caught me there. I was wondering what you were laughing about. Yes,
it's just a football season. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I know, man. It's October. We're still in football mode. The Indiana Pacers. Forgive me. One of the more fun, quote unquote, bad teams to watch. Their win total 38.5. Last year they were 35-47, but there was a fair amount of tanking done at the end of the season once they were kind of out of range for the play-in or playoff. They gave Tyrese Halliburton a bunch of money. They signed Bruce Brown. They traded for Obi Toppin. And key departures, basically just Chris Duarte, who they traded to the Kings. So, best and worst case scenario for the not Indianapolis, but Indiana Pacers.
Peyton Manning. Yeah, I don't know. Like, this is tough. No, it's not tough. I think like they added a ton of new talent. They're all a bunch of children for the most part. And they added Bruce Brown, who was like the shocking, like, wow, look how much Bruce Brown got. That's pretty crazy.
Sorry, I forgot to mention they did draft Jarace Walker 8th overall. I forgot to mention him.
Yeah, so I mean, look, they do have a ton of talent. It's a young team. Buddy Hield aside, maybe, who I'm not crazy about. I think he was very inefficient. They didn't play well last season. Their offensive rating was 19th in the league. They couldn't stop a nosebleed. They were 26th in defense in the league. So there was quite the tanking effort from them. I do like Jarace Walker. He could be a hell of a scorer for them. I was looking at his scouting report. There's a lot there. He's a good rim protector. He shows up on D. He has a huge wingspan. He's got a really good 3-point shot in the mid-range game. So I think they made an upgrade there. I think it just because you add so many young players, where are they going to get better? I don't think they're going to make the playoffs or the play-in. I think they're going to be under this 38.5. They're still developing all these rookie additions. I mean, for F's sake, are they going to trade Miles Turner or not? I feel like it's been 5 years of Miles Turner rumors. I just don't know what this organization is going for. They just are acquiring young guys and like, something will stick and we'll eventually be good after 6 years of picking up young people. But that's all I could. That's it for them. It's not really that complicated. It's not a good team yet.
I don't know, man. I think this is one where we really disagree. I think they are going to be definitely in the mix for the play-in. I think they're going to be in the top half of that play-in. I think they'll be pushing for that 6-7 seed. I love this team. I look at the roster. I love Tyrese Halliburton. I think he is elite. I think the Bruce Brown signing is huge for them. I'm not a fan of Buddy Hield. I think he is on his way out, but they have talent. I think Obi Toppin is a good backup big. I love what's his name, Andrew Nembhard. He was excellent last year for them, in spot starts. And I think they're finally going to decide, like, all right, we want to win. I don't think they will trade Miles Turner. I think they see him as a foundational piece now, despite all the rumors and stuff coming in. I think that he is among the upper echelon kind of big men in this league. I think he's one of the rare guys. He's a mobile big. I think he can score. He's versatile. So I'm high on this team. I do think I want to say they blast past this win total. I see them as like 42, 43 wins. I think they're closer to like what the Hawks were last year or what even the Heat were last year. I love what I see in their depth chart. I love their depth. I think they're going to be maybe like the Knicks of last year where they're kind of the overachievers. And there's a theme with me this year. I think I'm just leaning towards young-ish teams. You know what I'm saying? Like not super young, like not Orlando last year or OKC 2 years ago. I'm talking about like, you know, a couple years in where the youth is going to be the difference. It's like they've overcome their inexperience. I think they're kind of in that sweet spot. So, yeah, I'm surprised. Yeah, it's a good one. We're disagreeing on it. Disagreement is good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to be wrong. I do like everyone that they've acquired, and they have, aside from Buddy Hield, who we keep taking a baseball bat to a little bit. I think just the defense is the biggest question. They're going to score a ton. They're going to be an exciting offensive team. I think what could, I think, limit them or make them like a borderline 10th seed is just the defense. But I guess the 10th seed it's pretty damn low. I guess the play-in is not it's not a high bar. I guess they could get it. Maybe I should change my thing to over. Maybe they'll get it.
Well, I said top half of the play-in, so you could get in the bottom half with like 40 wins or something. So I think in top half, although I think the Bulls made a 10. They were the 10 seed and they were 40 and 42 or something. So that's just how I'm leaning. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this team. So we'll see. Next up, the New Jersey Nets. No, I'm just kidding. The Brooklyn Nets win total 37.5. Last year's record was 45 and 37, but you can completely throw that out the window. They were an entirely different team after the trade deadline. They had every single backup or third string wing in the NBA on this roster. But their key additions brought back Cam Johnson, signed Darius Baisley, Dennis Smith Jr., Lonnie Walker, Trendon Watford, and their big losses. I know you're laughing because you're like, who the hell is that? And they drafted two guys in the 20s, Noah Clowney and Darek Whitehead. Big losses, Seth Curry, Joe Harris, and Yuta Watanabe. So how do you see things going for the Nets?
This is a super weirdly constructed team because they just try to acquire as many wings as they possibly could. It's like a fantasy team. If I draft number 1 overall LeBron, I'm just going to make sure I have a bunch of players kind of like LeBron. I want a bunch of assists and rebounds.
Like a handcuff, right? You have like a million handcuffs for the same guy.
Yeah. It's Ben Simmons and Dorian Finney-Smith and Mikal Bridges and Royce O'Neal and Cam Johnson and Darius Baisley. They have like 7 guys that play that are like 3-and-D wings, which caps their versatility. They have defensive versatility. They might have a little spacing. Playmaking is a huge problem for this team. Play-in is absolutely the best case. I think that they're going to be a team. They're going to be kind of like the Raptors, where they have like just scrappy defensive guys. Where you're like, how are they going to get points like consistently and in different ways? Rebounding is going to be a bit of an issue. I don't know. There's just a bunch of guys acquired via trade. I would say the biggest question mark is Ben Simmons over his like PTSD from missing a layup 3 years ago or not? Like, is this guy going to play basketball? The pressure of playing with Katie and Kyrie is gone. Like, is this guy going to play or not? I think that's the big question mark.
Yeah. I've decided this summer or whatever this fall is I am completely out on the hypotheticals. I'm done with, on the West pod, I talked to Salman. I'm done with if Kyrie sticks around and gets his head on straight when it comes to basketball. I'm out on if Zion shows maturity and is healthy, then such and such, this and this will happen. I'm completely out on that. So throw Ben Simmons in there. I'm completely out on if Ben Simmons gets over whatever issues he was dealing with. I think he is who he is now, which is a bit part NBA player. And I'm spending too much time talking about him at this point when it comes to this team. I think the point that you brought up about consistency is huge for this team because there's a bunch of guys on this team where you could see they could score 40, 50 points on a given night. Spencer Dinwiddie could do that. Mikal Bridges could do that. Cam Thomas could do that. Lonnie Walker went crazy in the playoffs for 2 games and then disappeared. Cam Johnson, all these guys, it's the same thing. They can give you 40, but they can also give you 4. And they're just super weird. I think they're like an assets team at this point. I made the same comparison on the other pod with the Utah Jazz. Like they are an assets team. They're kind of all in the shop window. It's like, hey, come, what do you think about Ben Simmons? Oh, this Lonnie Walker fellow seems nice. So what about, I think they signed Cam Johnson, But I want to say the only two guys that are untouchable are Bridges, maybe Cam Johnson, maybe throw Nick Claxton in there. I feel like everybody else is, available for trade or, so they're open for business. And I think that they'll be kind of in the back half of that play-in unless they make some massive trade, which I think the team is probably like they have a lot of fatigue from doing like that superstar trade. So I can't see them doing that. So
I love this version of you that's like not taking shit. You're like Mark Wahlberg in The Departed. Like you think you're a cop, but you're not. You're not a cop. Like that's what you're like doubling down. Like it's not, you either are or you're not a cop. That's it.
I'm tired of it. Honestly, there's too much of this, what if Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are healthy?
That's not probably happening. You don't need to hypothetical that one.
Well, I'm saying you can throw it in that same pile. You can throw it in the pile with Zion and his maturity and his weight, with, all that stuff. I'm just, I love Kyrie. Well, it's true, right? He hasn't been in shape in 4 years.
Yeah.
You could throw John Moran in there. What if he stops, playing with guns and on Instagram Live? You can throw Kyrie. What if he decides to be happy? Just all these what ifs. I'm just like, I'm completely out on that. I'm not going to entertain them. I'm just like, I'm done. I'm going to go with as close to, there's no such thing as absolutes here, but I'm going to go with what I have like some concrete evidence of. And, for Ben Simmons, until he shows me otherwise, he is who he is at this point. And he's a backup. He's, just going to be running around out there doing a lot of cardio, maybe playing some good defense here and there. But I don't see him as an impact player. And the rest of the team is just kind of, again, they're just all in the shop window waiting for someone to come pluck them some contender that needs a wing. And I thought more teams would do that last year, but I guess it just happened too close to the trade deadline for them to make that happen. But yeah, I could see it happening a lot this year, especially as like some injuries pile up and stuff. I think a lot of these guys are going to get moved.
We shall see. Hypotheticals. Let's see. That's my least favorite. We'll see.
Yeah, right. It's just like a cop out. Like, I think the Bulls are going to win the championship, but we'll see. We'll see. Like, come on.
Speaking of,
the Chicago Bulls. They have the same projected win total or over under as the New Jersey Brooklyn Nets, 37.5. Last year they were 40-42. They barely made the play-in game. A lot of their fans did not want them to make the play-in game, but they gave Nikola Vucevic a contract extension. They signed Javon Carter, Torrey Craig. They re-signed Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, and they drafted Julian Phillips 35th overall. They lost out on Patrick Beverley and Derek Jones Jr. So, how do you see things going with the Bulls?
Interesting team because last year they were like top 5 in defensive rating, which was like really surprising. They had a bunch of magical DeMar DeRozan moments where he was like hitting big shots. I don't like this team. Is that bad? I don't like this. I don't know what they're doing is like the problem.
You know what? I think the fans feel the same way. Everyone in Chicago doesn't like this team either. So, yeah, you're not
like
alone.
I know you have a lot of Bulls fans in your life. One of my best friends is a Bulls fan, and I just have little faith in the direction of the team. When things are clicking, they are an exciting offensive team. Like Zach LaVine is, a really exciting offensive player. DeRozan's a vet. Vucevic has his moments. They added Javon Carter, who's like just good depth. Torrey Craig, like these are experienced guys in the league. They're just like, it's play-in. And here's what bothers me though, is they made the play-in and they were like 3 minutes from beating the Miami Heat and wasting everyone's time and losing to Milwaukee. So yes, I do think that like this is, I don't know, this is like a team that's lost in like they're in purgatory. They're a little bit in hell. Lonzo Ball is, might be done. There's a lot of uncertainty there. Mm-hmm. Patrick Williams is like, they've been waiting for him to be Kawhi Leonard for like 3 years. And I just don't think that's happening. So I don't like this team. I hate it when the team like lacks direction.
That's exactly what's happening here. And like I said, you're not alone. I do have a lot of Chicago Bulls fans in my life, and they don't like this team either. They're just asking. It's a lot of why. Why is Andre Drummond on our team? Why did we give Nikola Vucevic a lot of money?
Yeah.
Why I guess Zach LaVine is the only guy that's worth anything, aside from DeMar DeRozan as like a scorer. But it's a lot of like, how far does that get you? How far does that combination get you? There was like a magical brief moment where they had maybe the best defensive backcourt in the NBA, where they had Lonzo and Alex Caruso out there. But again, it's just a lot of like, well, if Lonzo never plays again, and the fact that he had to come out and dispute the fact that he could even get up out of a chair. There was rumors about his knee like being completely done, and he just had to record a video of him standing up out of a chair. It's not a good sign, and it's really sad. Obviously, I liked him as a player. I wish all the best, but I don't see the point of this team. I think they're just, like you said, they're in purgatory. They're mired in mediocrity, and there's just no point. Just bottom out, trade these guys, move on from them. I need to look at some of the contract situations with LaVine and DeRozan, see if they're even worth moving at this point. But it's just, there's no point. There's no point to the Bulls at this point. And I think I don't think they're gonna be in that play-in mix. I just don't think they're gonna be any good.
I think there's a missed opportunity to get into a really good draft class, and they completely missed out by going to the play-in tournament. From what I've read, the next couple of draft classes are not as exciting as the most recent one. So, yeah, Bulls fans, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry too, but not really. Anyway, next up, the Orlando Magic. Speaking of a team with direction, that is the Orlando Magic. Projected win total over under is 36.5. Last year they were 34-48, and they were probably one of the most fun 34-48 teams to watch. Key additions: they had 2 picks in the top 11, Anthony Black and Jet Howard. They brought back Mo Wagner. They signed Joe Ingles. They signed slam dunk champion Mac McClung.
Uh-oh.
And Admiral Schofield as well. And they waived Bol Bol, which is unfortunate because I thought he would have been fun on this team. But they have a lot of young players, a lot of really exciting young players. I believe Foncaro won Rookie of the Year last year, and it was well-deserved. So how do you see things going for the Magic this year?
I like the idea of them hitting the over. I think that this is going to be like a stubborn team. They already did pretty well last year with the limited experience that they had. They're one of the younger teams in the league. I think the only thing that skews their average age is Joe Ingles and Gary Harris at 9 years apiece. But otherwise, it's a bunch of children on the team. And I like that. Oklahoma City and Orlando are teams that have a lot of interesting talent. Anthony Black is a good player. Like, he's got Josh Giddey comparisons, and that's right up there with 2 exciting players in the league. Jet Howard I don't know how high his ceiling goes. He's not a freak athlete or anything like that, but he's been coached up his whole life. He's going to be very composed, catch and shoot situations.
Juwan Howard's son, right?
Yes, Juwan Howard's son. So I think that he will be like very composed, catch and shoot situations. Like, that's going to be really, really key for them if they can retain him and develop him. I like Markelle Fultz. I love a good comeback story. He after Philly tried to ruin him, he came back and he did fine in Orlando. Cole Anthony comes from a basketball family, and he's got a lot of bleep you to him. He's not exactly like an efficient player, but I love the passion there. So I think this team's upside. Like, they didn't make the play-in. They could flirt with it. I think like they were just outside of it, and they have a lot of interesting young guys that are going to make some noise. They finally got like an adult in the locker room with Joe Ingles, who's going to give them that Aussie honesty. I like that.
Yeah, I'm leaning. I think they're going to be comfortably in the play-in. Not saying much, but I think they'll be closer to the 6 than the 10 seed. I'll say that. Everything that you said about young team on the come up, everything's great. I mean, the OKC comparison is very apt. I think the difference is OKC has the guy. OKC has Shea or SGA, whatever you want to call him, and he's first team All NBA. Some people didn't like that, whatever. He is a top 10 guy, and he is the guy at the end of games for them. So I think it's dependent. Their success, their ceiling is whether it's Franz or Paolo, that become the guy. but I think both of them have the tools to do that. I'll probably lean more Paolo because of the deep offensive bag that he possesses. So I think he has potential to take that leap. I'm not saying all NBA or anything like that, but I do think he can be an all-star this year in a weakened Eastern Conference. So I think they quite easily make the play-in. So I think that pretty good ceiling on this team.
I think there's just a bit of a lack of experience. They're maybe another year or two away. It's a top-heavy East, so they just have a lot of opportunity to show something.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next up, the Toronto Raptors. They brought back Jakob Poeltl. They drafted the guy with the best name in the draft, Grady Dick. And they signed Dennis Schroeder. Yeah. Number one Dick, it says on the back of his jersey. So, probably the top seller in Canada right now. And they signed Dennis Schroeder and Jalen McDaniels. They lose out on Fred VanVleet, and that's really about it. And, of course, Nick Nurse is a key departure for them as well, who is, of course, a championship-winning coach. So how do you see things going for them? Oh, I'm sorry. And they were 41-41 last year.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see their approach with a new coach. Defensively, I think they have the opportunity to still be really stingy. They just have a lot of length. Grady Dick, his scouting report, solid shooter, like just a really, really gifted shooter. So I think that will make things interesting with the departure of Fred VanVleet, who was, I think, their best shooter on the team. So even though he was a bit on the inefficient side, great addition.
He didn't shoot great last year, but I think in general, a pretty good shooter.
Yeah. So Grady Dick, great addition. This is just another one of those. I think from this point on, aside from a couple teams, there's like, hey, maybe we can get the 10th seed and flirt with the play-in. But with Nick Nurse, he got the best out of them every night. I don't know if they can have as much consistency as they had. 41 wins was probably sounds about right. Like, it's like if you told me the Raptors won 41 games, oh, okay. I think their 36.5 is close. Like, if you bet the under, it sounds reasonable. If you bet the over, it's like how much over really can they get, if not on the nose. And their best players are always in trade talks. Like OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam are on the trading block, and their GM is notorious right now for saying, I won't give him to you unless you give me 11 first-round picks. So we'll see what happens there.
When I look at this, especially the starting five, it's curious that there's 36.5. I wonder how much that win total has to do with the prediction that one of those guys is going to get traded at some point. Because, I mean, their starting five is Dennis Schroeder, Scotty Barnes, Anunoby, Siakam, and Poeltl. Like, that's a pretty good starting five, depending on how you feel about Scotty Barnes. I think it's a better starting five than maybe Orlando's, some of the other teams that are right in front of them. Maybe the depth is the question mark, but I think some of this win total buzz or whatever is, I think, because they're expecting to trade one of these guys away. So I can see them again. I see them outside the play-in just because I expect one of these guys to finally get moved. I was talking to Ricky G, and he was saying that, Masai's not trading anybody. And it was kind of funny how he was saying it, but he's like you said, he's notorious for asking for everything in exchange for one of these guys. And I think maybe he's finally going to make that trade this year. And I think that's why I see them as a rebuilding team who's finally going to sell off some of these assets.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, the Charlotte Hornets. Over under 31.5. Last year, they were 27-55. I want to spend as little amount of time speaking on this team. I just don't like this team. I don't like anything involved with them, thanks to Miles Bridges. But key additions, they brought back Miles Bridges, who is going to be serving some suspension. They gave LaMelo Ball a big contract. They signed drafted Brandon Miller, number 2 overall, over Scoot Henderson, and signed PJ Washington. And they also drafted Amari Bailey, who is one of the more intriguing prospects, even though he was a second-round pick. They lost Kelly Oubre, Dennis Smith Jr., and Svi Mikhailuk, I believe is how you pronounce his name. So how do you see things going with this team?
Well, positive for them is they lost Kelly Oubre. I would say that's the first thing that made this team better already. Brandon Miller is an excellent pickup. I know that Scoot Henderson was supposed to go second, but Miller can create his own shot. He's a great free throw shooter. He's got a quick first step. He's going to be really versatile defensively because of his length. He still is an excellent draft pick for them, especially next to LaMelo, who defensively leaves a lot to be desired. They have a lot of young players. I know why you don't like the team, but like PJ Washington, Brandon Miller, even Nick Smith, who they drafted, is also getting a lot of buzz. He just has like a hell of a bag. He's got a smooth jumper. So I think like they got some lights out players on the team. They were terrible last year because LaMelo barely played, and it was the Scary Terry show. And that's why they were the 30th ranked offense in the league. So LaMelo is an instrumental part of them executing on offense. I think that like everyone else, like they can hit that over. They won 27 games without LaMelo. They can hit that 31 and a half easily. I think the question is they took James Bouknight in the lottery a couple years ago. He barely played last season. Can he stay healthy and make a leap for them? It's an interesting team.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it whatsoever. I just think it's like a daycare. I look at this team. It's a lot of kids. It's a lot of immature guys. PJ Washington has made some questionable decisions off the court. Brandon Miller, he had all that controversy coming in. Miles Bridges, I don't think is someone that should be on an NBA roster at this point, given everything that's come out and everything that's happened with him on the domestic violence side. And I think, for LaMelo Ball, he's not mature to me. I don't think he will ever be that guy on this team and in this organization. I think this is like a rudderless organization with no direction, and I think they're better off bottoming out, letting this be the LaMelo and Brandon Miller show, and let's see what happens. Let's pick up some draft capital and see what happens. I think they're also going to be sold at some point during this season, if not, maybe after the season. So I think that creates a lot of uncertainty, and I think it's going to be a lot of guys pouting and things like that. So I see them kind of propping up the standings at the bottom of the East here.
That's interesting. I've said interesting too much. It's so annoying. But I think like your observation is it's more so character based over like what their ceiling is. Like it's mainly like it's a bunch of children who their discipline will affect their quality of play.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like Houston last year, where they'll have a couple games where LaMelo or Brandon Miller is going to score 40 points and it's going to be awesome. But for the most part, it's just going to be a bunch of guys kind of out for themselves. I'm not high on the coach, the organization in general. Just, I think they'll be at the bottom of the East here.
Congrats to MJ for the $4 billion.
Yeah. Yeah, whenever that happens. Next up, the Detroit Pistons projected win total over under 28.5. Last year, they were horrific, 17-65. They drafted one of the Thompson twins, Asar Thompson, 5th overall. They went out and got Joe Harris, Monty Morris. They also signed Buddy Boeheim, Jared Rhoden, Xavier Simpson, just a bunch of random dudes. They lost out basically just on Corey Joseph, who is now with the Warriors, which I did not know about until a couple of days ago. So that's cool. So how do you see things going for the Pistons? Do you see them finally getting out of this lottery hell that they've been in?
It really sucks for them, right? Because they lost 65 games and did not get Wemby. Let's just call him Wemby. But they didn't have Cade Cunningham for most of the season. They're one of the youngest teams in the league. I like this Thompson twin. I think that some are saying that the Rockets' brother is a little bit better, but he's shown promise as an outside shooter. I think that in terms of defensive ability, he's got a lot of upside, which I think this team needs. Cade isn't exactly a defensive lockdown type of player, so I think that part will make them. It's another development year at the end of the day. They added Joe Harris and Monte Morris, which I think is fine. They have a wealth of bigs, probably too many bigs. And they'll be like big by committee with like James Wiseman and Marvin Bagley and et cetera. So it'll be interesting to see if they end up trading James Wiseman. Maybe they'll trade him back to Golden State, which would be funny. They'll just pull like a Gary Payton and just get someone they already had. So yeah, they'll get close to that, but I still think they'll hit the under just because it's a lot of uncertainty. It's a young team. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've heard that James Wiseman might be released at some point, which would be so maybe he does end up on the Warriors that way. They have Beef Stew, Isaiah Stewart, probably the best nickname in the NBA. Yeah, I do see them finally starting to compete and not contend by any means, but I do see them in like the mid-20s. Like, okay, let's finally like try to win at this point. So I'm seeing them, probably in the mid-20s. I don't see them hitting that 28 and a half or 30, whatever it is. But I do see them at least, being a little more fun to watch. And the last team, which was kind of interesting, I was surprised to see these guys propping up the standings here, is the Washington Wizards. Projected over-under win total is 24 and a half. Last year, they were 35 and 47, but this is a completely different team. So they brought back Kyle Kuzma, traded for Jordan Poole, drafted Bilal Coulibaly, 7th overall, went out and got Tyus Jones via trade, Landry Shamet, Mike Muscala, Danilo Gallinari, Patrick Baldwin, Taj Gibson. I could go on for 5-6 more names, but this is an entirely new team. And of course, their big losses: Bradley Beal, Kristaps Porzingis, Monty Morris, Jordan Goodwin, and I guess Chris Paul. He was on the team for like half a second. Not really a loss or an addition, but anyway. Were you surprised that the Wizards had the lowest projected win total here like I was?
A little bit. I thought that, I think that they should be switched with Detroit, to be honest with you. I think they'll hit the over. This team is weird. It's really weird.
Very weird.
Yeah, they're not going to play defense. Despite all of these players, they don't have any all-star level talent. I'll take that back. Bilal Coulibaly has the potential to be awesome. He's an excellent defender. He has an all defense potential. He's a great cutter to the rim. He's going to be creative offensively. He's a good slasher and cutter. But this team in general, with Coulibaly, while he's kind of developing, just has a bunch of random experienced guys. Yeah. Playmaking is going to be so volatile. It's going to be individual shot making. So they're going to have these Jordan Poole going off for 35 a night, a couple of nights, and then they're going to lose because Jordan Poole is going to go 2 for 11 also on a bunch of nights. Yeah, the 24 and a half is a little mean, but I don't expect too much more from them.
There's a lot of guys on this team that I like. I think individually, as individual players, I love Tyus Jones. I thought him not being on Memphis anymore is a big deal. I think he was one of the main reasons that they were able to survive those long periods without John Morant. So him being on this team, I think he brings a actual point guard presence to this team. I don't think he's listed as a starter right now, but maybe he's just running that second unit. But I like Jordan Poole as a scorer. I like Corey Kispert. I like Kyle Kuzma as a player. Maybe that's about it. We saw flashes from Patrick Baldwin Jr. I think we're maybe a little biased as Warriors fans because we hoped that he would become something. But there's a lot of guys that you're just like, oh, he's on this team? That's interesting. But I think they're going to be probably one of my favorite league pass teams to watch. Especially as an East Coast team, that 4 p.m., 4:30 tip off for us out here on the West Coast. Probably watching a lot of Wizards games more than I would think, just because they seem fun. They're going to be, they should have a reality show following Kuzma and Poole, like a buddy cop show or buddy cop movie, just following these guys around. So I was surprised. I think they're going to be closer to 30 points. I think they have a lot of offensive firepower. They probably can't stop anybody, but I think they'll catch the right team on a back-to-back or on a Tuesday night or whatever, and or the fourth of a 5th game road trip, and just kick the shit out of somebody because Jordan Poole, like you said, goes off for 30 and Kuzma throws in 25. And yeah, so I'm excited to watch this team. I don't think they'll be in the play-in, but I do see them in like the 30, 35 win range.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I could see Milwaukee ripping off like a 9-game winning streak, and then they just roll into Washington, and Jordan Poole and frickin' Landry Shamet are giving them 65 combined. They're like, what the hell? Frickin' Jordan Poole.
Yeah, Landry Shamet goes like, 4 for 5 from 3, and, Patrick Baldwin becomes something. I don't know. I'm excited to watch this team just from a pure like basketball curiosity perspective. So I think we made it pretty clear who we think our top 8 or top 10 teams are. I think, we're leaning. We know that this is a very top heavy conference with, the top 3 teams, top 4 teams, I guess, Milwaukee, Boston, maybe Philly, maybe Cleveland. There's a lot of questions. There's like that elite tier, Boston, Milwaukee, and then everybody else. And then, that tier of just a bunch of teams that we know are going to be in the top, top 5 picks, but we'll see, right? To use your favorite word.
It's interesting. Very interesting. All of it's very, I'm so intrigued. I feel like
interesting.
Poppy Lebitard from Highly Questionable. See, I'm very intrigued.
Well, thank you, Osama. Appreciate your time, man. Thank you guys for checking us out. Please hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening or watching this podcast, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. You can find us on all the major social media platforms as well at 4040 Vision Pod, and you can sign up for our newsletter at 4040visionmedia.com. Thanks, y'all.
Bye.